There is one habit, one quiet, unglamorous, ordinary habit that separates the people who win in life from the people who spend their whole lives wondering why they never did. It is not a secret. It is not hidden. It is not reserved for the gifted or the lucky. It is available to every human being who is willing to build it. But most people never will. Think about that. Millions of people share the same dream. Millions of people share the same goals. Millions of people share the same ambition, the same hunger, the same hope for a better life. And yet only a small handful of them ever arrive. Why? Not because the others lacked talent, not because the others lacked opportunity, not because the others lacked intelligence. They lacked one habit, the habit of finishing what they started. Now understand something important. Most people are good at beginning. Beginning is exciting. Beginning is fresh. Beginning is filled with energy, with vision, with possibility. Anyone can begin. Anyone can announce a plan. Anyone can post about a new chapter. Anyone can talk about the goal for the next few weeks. Beginnings cost almost nothing, but finishing is different. Finishing is quiet. Finishing is heavy. Finishing is what happens long after the excitement has faded, long after the audience has stopped watching, long after the mood has died, long after the plan has become boring, long after the beginning is a distant memory. Finishing is what happens when nothing about the goal feels new anymore, and you keep showing up anyway. That is the habit. That is the dividing line between winners and everyone else. Now think about this. The winners in life are not always the smartest. They are not always the most talented. They are not always the most connected. They are not always the most impressive at the start. In fact, if you had looked at them at the beginning, you might not have chosen them at all. They were often the underdogs. They were often overlooked. They were often quiet. But they had one thing. They finished. They kept going when the others quit. They stayed when the others walked away. They worked when the others got tired. They studied when the others got distracted. They trained when the others got bored. And over years, that one habit, the habit of finishing quietly, built a life the others could not compete with. Success is predictable. It's not luck, and it's not magic. It's hard work and discipline. And the highest expression of that discipline is the habit of finishing what you begin. Now, let me say this clearly. The world is full of unfinished things. Unfinished books, unfinished businesses, unfinished workouts, unfinished courses, unfinished projects, unfinished plans, unfinished dreams. Most people do not lose because they picked the wrong dream. They lose because they abandoned the right one halfway through. That is the tragedy of average. Not that people never tried, that they tried and stopped just before it would have worked. The harvest in life almost always comes later than we expect. Always. There is a gap between the planting and the harvest, and that gap is where most people quit. They plant. They water for a few weeks. Nothing appears on the surface. And they walk away, convinced the seed was dead. But the seed was not dead. The seed was working underground, in the dark, invisible to anyone who is not patient enough to wait. The habit of finishing is the habit of waiting. The habit of finishing is the habit of trusting the process, even when the process gives you nothing back yet. The habit of finishing is the habit of showing up long after showing up has stopped being interesting. That kind of habit is rare. And that kind of habit is exactly why the harvest belongs to so few. Now understand something important. Winners do not have superhuman motivation. This is one of the great misunderstandings about successful people. Watch them long enough and you will notice something. They do not always feel like it. They do not always want to. They do not always wake up inspired. They do not always love their work in the moment. They have low days. They have doubtful days. They have days when the goal feels far and the road feels long. But they do not stop. That is the whole secret. They do not quit on bad days. They do not quit on slow weeks. They do not quit when results are late. They do not quit when others do not notice. They do not quit when the applause never comes. They keep the promise they made to the version of themselves that decided to begin, and they keep it even when the beginning has long since faded. That is finishing. That is winning. That is the habit that changes everything. Now let me ask you something. How many good ideas have you started in your life? How many books have you opened but not finished? How many plans have you launched but not carried through? How many habits have you begun with real intention, only to abandon them a few weeks later? How many versions of a better life have you almost lived before you talked yourself out of continuing? Do not be ashamed of the answer. Every human being alive has the same graveyard of unfinished efforts. What matters is what you do next. What matters is whether you build the one habit that separates the finished from the abandoned. Because if you build the habit of finishing, everything else in your life begins to reshape itself around it. Your confidence rises. Your standards rise. Your identity rises. Your results rise. Not because you became a different person, but because you finally started keeping the promises you had been breaking for years. Now think about this. The habit of finishing is not built through big dramatic acts. It is built in small, unimpressive ones. It is built by finishing the workout you would rather skip, finishing the chapter you would rather close, finishing the task you would rather leave for tomorrow, finishing the conversation you would rather avoid, finishing the plan you would rather abandon. Each of these looks small. Each of these feels forgettable. But each of them is training you to become the kind of person who finishes. And the kind of person who finishes small things becomes the kind of person who can finish large ones. That is how identity is built. Not through statements, through completions. You do not become a finisher by declaring yourself one. You become a finisher by finishing. And every completed small thing is a vote for that identity. Enough votes, and the identity becomes who you are. Now understand something important. There is a moment inside every project, every goal, every dream, when the excitement dies. It is a real moment. It is a predictable moment. It comes to everyone. It came to every person you admire. It came the same way it will come to you. And in that moment, one of two things will happen. You will quit, or you will finish. There is nothing in between. The people who quit at that moment are not weak. They are simply untrained. They have never practiced the habit of pushing through the point where the interest dies. They think the death of interest is a signal to leave. It is not. It is a signal that the real work is about to begin. Everything before that moment was preparation. Everything after that moment is character. The winners in life have simply practiced walking past this moment more times than everyone else. Not because they never wanted to quit. Because they trained themselves to stay. Now, think about this. There is a special kind of respect you begin to earn from yourself when you finish things. It is not the respect of the world. That respect comes and goes. It is the respect of yourself. And it is the deepest respect a human being can hold. It is the quiet inner knowledge that when you say you will do something, you actually do it. When you begin something, you actually finish it. When you promise yourself, you actually keep the promise. That inner respect changes how you walk. It changes how you speak. It changes how you carry yourself into a room. It changes how you handle setbacks. It changes how you sleep at night. Because you are no longer arguing with yourself about the person you are. The evidence is in. You have proven in your own life that you are a person who finishes. And that inner proof is worth more than any outer recognition. Success is predictable. It's not luck and it's not magic. It's hard work and discipline. And the discipline of finishing is what turns discipline itself into identity. Now let me speak about a mistake most people make. They start too many things at once. They begin 5 plans, 10 goals, 3 habits, 2 projects, and a new routine, all in the same week. And because they have started so many things, they cannot finish any of them. They spread their effort across too much ground, and none of it grows. They confuse activity with progress. They confuse beginning with building. But a scattered effort is not a productive effort. You cannot finish everything. You can only finish something. And a person who finishes one thing consistently will outperform a person who begins 10 things constantly every single time. Choose fewer battles, fight them longer. This is the discipline of the winner. They do not chase every good idea. They chase the good ideas they can actually finish. They know that finishing is the multiplier. They know that a small, completed effort is worth more than a large, abandoned one. They know that the world respects follow-through more than ambition, always. Now think about this. The habit of finishing does not always feel like winning while you are doing it. It often feels like slogging. It often feels like grinding. It often feels like nothing. There will be long stretches where you cannot see the progress, where the results are hidden, where the applause is missing, where you have to trust the process on faith alone. That is the price of the habit. You pay it in silence. You pay it in patience. You pay it in ordinary days that no one will ever celebrate. But you pay it because you know something the quitters do not know. You know that the harvest is always coming and that it always finds the person who stayed in the field. You know that consistency compounds in ways that are invisible for a long time and then suddenly undeniable. You know that the person who finishes small things week after week is quietly becoming the kind of person who finishes large things year after year. Now understand something important. The habit of finishing does not require perfection. This is where a lot of people trip. They think finishing means doing it perfectly. They think a workout does not count unless it was flawless. They think a workday does not count unless it was maximally productive. They think a habit does not count unless it was executed with total discipline. And because their standard for finishing is unrealistic, they never actually finish anything. Finishing does not mean perfect. Finishing means done. Done imperfectly. Done tired. Done annoyed. Done through interruptions. Done through a bad mood. Done with less energy than you wanted. But done. Because a slightly imperfect finish is still a finish. And a person who finishes imperfectly 1,000 times will build a life 1,000 miles beyond a person who is still waiting for the conditions to be perfect enough for their first finish. Now let me ask you something. What is one thing in your life right now that you have started, but not yet finished, that would change something real if you finally saw it through? Do not answer quickly. Think carefully. Because inside that answer is a doorway. Not the biggest doorway. Not the most impressive doorway, but a real one. A doorway you have been standing near for a long time, waiting for a burst of motivation that never came. You do not need motivation to walk through it. You only need the habit of finishing. And the habit of finishing begins with one act. The act of finishing that one thing. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Not when the schedule opens up. Now. Because the thing you finish this week is the thing that begins to train the new identity you are trying to build. It is the small proof to your own mind that you are becoming a different kind of person. Now, think about this. The world is loud, and it will always be loud. It will offer you 100 new things every day to start. It will show you 1,000 new interests every year to pursue. It will pull your attention in every direction all the time. And you must learn to say no to almost all of it so that you can say a deep, disciplined yes to the few things that actually matter. The habit of finishing requires the discipline of protecting your focus. You cannot finish what you keep interrupting. You cannot finish what you keep replacing. You cannot finish what you keep abandoning for the next shiny idea. Finishing is a form of loyalty. It is loyalty to your original decision, even when a newer, more exciting decision walks past. And loyalty like that is one of the rarest qualities in the modern world. It is exactly why the few who possess it end up so far ahead of everyone else. Now understand something important. Every finished thing is a foundation for the next finished thing. This is the compounding secret of the habit. When you finish one thing, you have proven to yourself you can finish. That proof makes it easier to finish the next thing, and the next, and the next, until finishing has stopped being a struggle and started being a natural way of life. A person who has finished 1,000 small things is unshakable. They do not need external motivation. They do not need permission. They do not need the world to believe in them. They have the only evidence that actually matters, their own track record built quietly, week after week, year after year, by the ordinary act of finishing what they began. That is the habit that separates winners from everyone else. Not talent, not luck, not connections, not intelligence. Finishing. Now let me say this clearly. You do not need a new personality. You do not need a new environment. You do not need a new set of circumstances. You need a new relationship with completion. You need to become a person who does not walk away halfway through. You need to become a person who finishes small things every single day until finishing is not a decision but a reflex. Because a person who finishes reflexively will accomplish more in 5 years than a person who begins constantly will accomplish in 50. The math of a finished life is different. The math of a finished life compounds. The math of a finished life pays interest for decades. And most people will never taste that math because they never sat still long enough to complete the first equation. Now think about this final truth. You are one habit away from a different life. Not 10 habits, not 100 habits. One. The habit of finishing what you have already started. You do not need more ideas. You do not need more inspiration. You do not need more insight. You need to close the loops you already opened. You need to complete the things that are already sitting in your life, half-built, waiting for you to return. Return. Return to the work you set aside. Return to the habit you dropped. Return to the goal you got quiet about. Return to the promise you broke to yourself last month and quietly keep it this month. That is where the transformation starts. Not in a new plan, in a resumed one. Not in a new beginning, in a completed one. Because winners are not people who begin better than everyone else. They are people who finish while everyone else is still starting over. Success is predictable. It's not luck. And it's not magic. It's hard work and discipline. And the discipline of finishing is the discipline that makes every other discipline count. So build it. Build it in small ways today. Finish the workout. Finish the chapter. Finish the task. Finish the conversation. Finish the day well. Finish the promise. Finish the intention you have been carrying for too long. Because every finished thing is a brick. And enough bricks become a life. And that life will not look like the average. It will not feel like the average. It will not end like the average. It will be the life of a finisher. And finishers, in a world of beginners, quietly rule the future. Master your focus. Master your follow-through. Master your future. And keep moving forward, no matter what.